I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
The meeting was supposed to remain sealed behind palace doors. No recording, no official minutes, no explanation to the public. But within hours, royal staff began repeating one devastating sentence spoken about Queen Camilla, a sentence so direct that King Charles stopped moving. Prince William refused to soften it, and every person around the table understood that the future of the monarchy had just been redrawn. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had called the private evening gathering at Buckingham Palace to settle responsibilities during an approaching transition in royal leadership. William arrived beside Catherine, while Camilla sat near the king. Anne, Edward, Sophie, and several senior household officials completed the circle. A royal household is the staff and advisors who manage a senior royal's official duties. Every person present understood why the meeting mattered. Uncertainty over the next reign was already creating rival expectations, and one unclear boundary could become a lasting family crisis. Palace staff surrendered their phones before entering the corridor. The doors closed shortly after 9 o'clock, and the discussion continued far beyond its scheduled ending. Then William spoke. According to a fictional documented account later repeated by staff, the future king declared that Camilla must hold no authority over his reign, Catherine's household, or decisions involving George, Charlotte, and Louis. Her position, he said, ended with supporting Charles. It could not extend into the next generation. Charles placed both hands flat against the table and lowered his eyes. The king did not challenge his son, because William had framed the demand as protection for the future crown, rather than punishment against Camilla. His silence exposed the brutal choice before him: preserve his wife's dignity, or defend boundaries his heir believed essential. Camilla asked whether everyone agreed. Her voice remained steady, but Sophie noticed the queen's grip tightening around the chair. Anne held her gaze. Catherine looked deeply uncomfortable, yet she refused to contradict her husband. The Princess of Wales understood that silence would wound Camilla, but opposing William would weaken the very boundary he was trying to establish. A staff member waiting outside later described hearing a chair scrape sharply across the floor. Camilla's voice followed. Then say it clearly, am I family, or merely temporary? Silence filled the corridor before Anne answered. The Princess Royal said Camilla was Charles's chosen wife and queen during his reign, but she would not shape the reign that followed. Charles then asked everyone except William and Camilla to leave. The monarch closed the door himself, sealing 3 wounded people inside. But before that closed-door exchange could be understood, the personal stakes of every person around the table had to be exposed, and for Camilla, the discussion was never only about authority. Saved, faster delivery remains the priority, and slight word count variation is acceptable for upcoming sections. To the outside world, they were symbols arranged in perfect order: the king, the queen, the prince and princess of Wales. Inside that locked room, however, titles offered no protection. Charles saw the woman he had defended for decades. William saw the boundary protecting his wife and children. Camilla saw the possibility that everything she had endured would end with a public crown but no lasting place. Charles felt the weight of every year that had brought Camilla to the center of royal life. The king had spent decades defending their marriage, repairing public trust, and proving that the woman beside him belonged within the monarchy. Any restriction placed upon her now felt like a judgment on more than the queen. It felt like a rejection of his choices, his loyalty, and the life he had fought to make acceptable. William carried a different responsibility. The prince was not arguing over ceremonial rank, meaning the formal position a royal holds during public events. He was protecting the structure that would exist after his father's reign. Competing advisors, rival households, and divided loyalties could weaken Catherine's future authority and disrupt George's preparation. The future king believed the next generation required one undisputed center, not several private circles competing for influence. Camilla studied Catherine more closely than anyone else. William's firmness wounded her, but the younger woman's silence cut deeper. The queen remembered moments when she had privately supported the princess during intense scrutiny. And now she interpreted that silence as proof that Catherine had already accepted a future in which Camilla remained outside the inner circle. Catherine felt that accusation without hearing it spoken. She remembered Camilla's kindness during difficult periods and understood the cost of allowing her to feel discarded. Yet the Princess of Wales also knew why William demanded clarity. Compassion could not become confusion, and gratitude could not override the need for a stable future household. Anne watched Charles straighten a pen that was already perfectly aligned. The Princess Royal recognized the gesture from childhood, a sign that her brother was fighting to control emotion. She quietly warned him not to turn a constitutional boundary, the formal limit separating one royal role from another, into a betrayal of his marriage. Edward and Sophie already knew the confrontation was coming. Before the meeting, both had agreed to support an independent transition council led by William and Anne. A transition council is a planning group created to prepare responsibilities for the next reign. Their support meant the heir had entered the room knowing he was not alone. Camilla finally understood. The family had discussed her authority before she arrived. William admitted it openly because earlier warnings had failed. That confession forced the question everyone had avoided. What had she done to make informal limits seem inadequate? The answer led back to one carefully staged royal ceremony, one altered instruction, and the moment William decided that silence had become more dangerous than confrontation. Every family crisis has a moment that appears harmless, until its true meaning becomes clear. For the royals, that moment came during a private preparation ceremony at Windsor Castle. There were no raised voices and no public scandal. There was only a revised seating plan, an instruction issued under Camilla's name, and Catherine discovering that decisions about her own future household had been made without her knowledge. Uncertainty had been growing between Charles's household and William's emerging court. Staff received overlapping instructions about patronages, ceremonial precedents, family appearances, and access to the younger royals. Ceremonial precedence means the formal order determining where royal figures stand, walk, or sit during official events. Camilla believed central coordination would prevent contradiction and protect the king from competing messages. William saw something more dangerous: advisors treating Catherine's household like a junior department instead of the foundation of the next reign. The breaking point came during preparations for a Windsor investiture rehearsal 6 weeks earlier. An investiture is a formal ceremony in which honors are presented on behalf of the sovereign. Camilla's private secretary circulated a revised protocol, placing the Queen at the center of the family procession while moving Catherine behind senior supporting royals. The same instruction declared that future ceremonial arrangements involving George required clearance through Camilla's office. Catherine discovered the change when an aide quietly placed the schedule beside her. She read the line concerning her son twice, folded the paper, and left the chamber without creating a public scene. The princess could endure personal embarrassment. She could not accept another household claiming approval rights over George's preparation for kingship. William found Catherine alone in an adjoining room, still holding the folded schedule. She told the prince that this was no longer about where she stood during one ceremony. It was about whether Camilla's advisors could slowly establish authority over their children through routine instructions that nobody challenged until they became tradition. William confronted the Queen. Camilla insisted she had approved coordination, not control, and blamed the wording on overzealous staff. Her private secretary then produced an earlier handwritten note carrying the instruction, "All future arrangements must pass through my office." The words made denial impossible. Camilla had intended order, but the language granted reached far beyond one rehearsal. Anne warned Charles privately that the instruction crossed a line. The Princess Royal urged her brother to issue a written correction before uncertainty hardened into precedent. The king promised to act, yet no clarification followed. William interpreted the delay as proof that informal assurances would always surrender to personal pressure. The future king responded by preparing a formal division of authority proposal. He demanded a meeting where every senior royal would finally have to choose. When that proposal was finally placed on the table, Camilla did not retreat, and the quiet dispute erupted into the most personal confrontation of Charles's reign. The door had barely closed before restraint disappeared. Camilla turned toward William and demanded that he repeat the accusation without advisors, siblings, or carefully prepared language between them. Charles remained standing near the fireplace, trapped between his wife and his heir. What followed was not a debate about schedules or offices. It was a reckoning over loyalty, memory, legitimacy, and who had the right to define the monarchy's future. William remained at one end of the table, while Camilla stood opposite him. Charles positioned himself between them without fully facing either person, as though choosing a direction would become a declaration of loyalty. The prince explained that his proposal did not remove her title, charities, public role, or place beside the king. It established a boundary. Her household could not direct Catherine, issue instructions concerning George, Charlotte, or Louis, or influence preparations for the next reign. A royal household is the staff and advisors who manage a senior royal's official work. Camilla heard the limits as rejection. She accused William of tolerating her only, while his father needed peace, and of waiting for weakness before erasing everything she had built. The Queen's voice sharpened as years of insecurity broke through. She had endured public hostility, served beside Charles, and accepted duties others avoided. Now she believed the future king intended to reduce that service to a temporary arrangement. William did not retreat. He said the dispute became personal when Catherine left the Windsor rehearsal carrying instructions about George that she had never approved. The prince had watched his wife treated like a guest in her own future. His silence, he said, ended the moment another office claimed authority over their son's preparation for kingship. Camilla moved her chair aside with a sudden scrape. "Look at me, and say I do not belong." William held her gaze. "She belonged beside Charles," he answered, "but not above Catherine, and never between the heir and his children." Charles finally intervened. The king warned that the boundary might be constitutionally logical, meaning consistent with the established limits between royal roles, but emotionally brutal. William answered that unclear power would be worse. It would force the next generation to fight battles the current one had refused to settle. Camilla then revealed the promise. Charles had privately reassured her that she would retain a guiding family role even after William's accession. The monarch's silence confirmed it. He had offered comfort without authority to guarantee it, creating a direct conflict between private loyalty and succession planning. The confrontation had revealed the emotional wound, but the final decision would not be controlled by emotion alone. Behind the family stood a network of offices capable of turning spoken boundaries into permanent reality. Kings may speak with authority, but monarchies survive through documents, offices, signatures, and people who know where power truly rests. While Charles wrestled with a promise made to his wife, senior officials had already examined the legal and household consequences. Their conclusion was unforgiving. Camilla could advise the king privately, but she could not inherit his influence over the next reign, or command the household being built around William. The structure behind that conclusion was simple, even if its emotional cost was not. Charles controlled the current royal household, while William maintained a separate office with independent advisors, finances, duties, and authority over the preparation of Catherine and their children. A royal household is the staff and administrative system supporting a senior member of the family. The heir's office could cooperate with the sovereign, but it could not be placed permanently beneath the queen consort's advisors without weakening the next reign before it began. The Lord Chamberlain's office supported the proposal, alongside constitutional advisors, William's private secretary, and Anne. The Lord Chamberlain is the senior official responsible for coordinating major royal ceremonial and household matters. Each person viewed the dispute differently, yet all reached the same conclusion. Personal loyalty could not override institutional continuity. Anne became the bridge between those cold rules and the family pain beneath them. Charles read the written recommendation alone after midnight. The king reached the paragraph limiting Camilla's future influence, removed his glasses, and set the document down without turning the page. An aide waiting nearby noticed that he remained motionless for several minutes. He felt cornered by the very structure he represented. Protecting his wife risked creating lasting uncertainty around William. Accepting the framework confirmed her deepest fear that her place depended upon Charles remaining sovereign. Anne confronted her brother privately. She told him love could not be written into a future monarch's chain of command, meaning the formal line through which authority and instructions pass. Charles accused her of siding with William. The Princess Royal answered that she was preventing a future rupture that could humiliate Camilla far more publicly. The decisive clause left no room for private promises. Upon William's accession, every instruction issued through the current Queen's household concerning the Wales family would automatically expire. Charles could offer reassurance, but he could not bind the next sovereign. Catherine then intervened. The princess requested written protection for Camilla's charities, public duties, and ceremonial dignity. Her compassion proved the proposal was not revenge. Charles signed the framework before dawn, yet delayed telling his wife that its most important boundary had already become final. By sunrise, the decision existed in ink, and when Camilla learned that Charles had signed it, the first consequences were immediate, personal, and impossible to conceal. There was no public announcement when Camilla's authority narrowed. No trumpet, no palace statement, no visible removal of a title. The change arrived through a folder placed beside her breakfast setting. One page explained that her office would no longer approve engagements involving Catherine or the Wales children. Another confirmed that future reign planning had transferred completely to William. She read both pages before asking the question Charles had feared. Camilla's advisors had already been removed from transition meetings before the household finished breakfast. Her office lost clearance authority over Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis, while joint ceremonial plans now required separate approval from William's team. Clearance authority means the power to review and approve an action before it proceeds. The speed mattered. This was not simply a warning spoken during an emotional family argument. It was a prepared transfer of control, waiting for one signature. Camilla closed the folder carefully at Clarence House and asked her private secretary whether Charles had personally approved the changes. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages a royal's official work and advice. The official confirmed that the king's signature appeared on the final page. The queen dismissed everyone immediately. She did not raise her voice. That restraint made the silence more devastating. Charles arrived expecting anger and found his wife seated alone. Camilla told him William's demand was not the deepest betrayal. The prince had spoken plainly and accepted responsibility for his position. Her husband had signed the restriction before finding the courage to explain it. The king admitted he believed delaying the conversation would spare her pain. Camilla answered that the delay had allowed palace machinery to speak for him. Their marriage, defended for decades through scandal and resistance, had been reduced to an administrative notice placed beside breakfast. Charles tried to reach for her hand, but she withdrew it. The monarch had chosen institutional clarity, yet his silence had made that necessary choice feel like abandonment. A senior aide brought another danger before the private wound could settle. Details from the meeting had already reached two separate royal households. William's exact sentence about Camilla's exclusion was being repeated almost word for word. Someone close to the room had deliberately released it. William reacted with fury. The future king had designed the framework to settle authority privately while preserving the queen's dignity. A leak could transform protection into punishment and make Catherine appear complicit in a public humiliation campaign she had never supported. Catherine refused to let that happen. The princess decided to approach Camilla alone, without William, Charles, advisors, or written agreements between them. The institutions had delivered their judgment, but only a private encounter between the two women could determine whether the family emerged divided by resentment or steadied by an unexpected act of grace. Catherine entered the room alone. No secretary followed her. No husband waited at the door. Camilla remained beside the window, still carrying the humiliation of learning that her influence had been restricted and her private anguish leaked beyond the palace. For the first time, the future queen and the current queen faced one another without ceremony. What passed between them altered the meaning of the entire conflict. Catherine had requested the meeting at Clarence House that same afternoon, and refused official notes from either household. A royal household is the staff and advisors who manage a senior family member's duties, but she wanted none of that machinery between them. The princess asked that every word remain personal rather than constitutional. Camilla assumed she had come to defend William's decision. The Queen said explanations were unnecessary because the future had already chosen which woman mattered and which one would be remembered as temporary. Catherine did not deny the pain. She admitted supporting the boundary because uncertainty surrounding her children had become unbearable. The princess described finding the Windsor instruction concerning George and feeling that motherhood itself had been placed beneath palace hierarchy. She could endure embarrassment, criticism, and even resentment. She could not accept another office claiming approval rights over her son's preparation for kingship. Camilla finally confessed what control had concealed. She had demanded tighter coordination because Charles's weakening authority made her fear irrelevance. The Queen had spent years fighting for acceptance, and the possibility of losing influence felt like losing security itself. She admitted that control had become a substitute for certainty, and that she had failed to recognize how threatening it appeared to Catherine. Catherine reached across the small table and turned the administrative folder face down. An administrative framework is a written system that defines how duties and authority are organized. She told Camilla they would speak as two women who had married into the same unforgiving institution, not as rival courts defending territory. Catherine then revealed what the Queen had not known. The princess had personally insisted that Camilla's charities, public precedence beside Charles, and ceremonial dignity remain protected. She had prevented the restrictions from becoming punishment. Camilla stared at her, realizing the woman she believed was erasing her had quietly preserved everything that still belonged to her. Camilla agreed to release every informal claim over the Wales household and promised to issue the instruction herself. Catherine answered that institutional authority might end, but family belonging would not. Inside Clarence House, resentment had finally given way to understanding. Outside, however, the leaked sentence was becoming a national headline, powerful enough to define every person involved. By evening, the palace's most private argument belonged to the entire country. Broadcasters interrupted scheduled programs. Commentators debated whether William had defended the future or humiliated his father's wife. Crowds gathered outside royal gates, holding phones toward windows that revealed nothing. Yet one newspaper front page captured the national mood more powerfully than any official statement. A crown, divided by a single black line. The leak moved with frightening speed. A palace correspondent first received the sentence, declaring that Camilla would hold no authority over Catherine or the Wales children. Minutes later came confirmation that Charles had signed a formal household framework. A household framework is a written arrangement defining which royal office controls particular duties and decisions. Buckingham Palace refused immediate comment. William's team also remained silent, while the Queen's staff cancelled a routine briefing. That absence of denial gave the story more force than any announcement could have done. The Daily Chronicle defined the next morning with a devastating front page. Camilla appeared alone beneath the headline, "Queen for this reign but not the next." A black dividing line separated her from a smaller image of William, Catherine, and George. The design reduced a painful family decision to one brutal symbol, the present on one side, the future on the other. Charles watched the discussion from his private office and asked an aide to lower the volume. The king seemed less disturbed by criticism of his own judgment than by seeing his wife turned into an image of exclusion. He had accepted the boundary, but he had never intended the country to watch Camilla absorb it alone. Public reactions split immediately. Some praised William for protecting Catherine and making certain that no rival household could interfere with the next reign. Others condemned the prince's language as unnecessarily cold toward a woman who had spent years serving beside Charles. The argument was no longer about procedure. It had become a judgment on loyalty, marriage, and belonging. Anne moved before speculation hardened further. The Princess Royal authorized a tightly controlled clarification, stating that Camilla remained fully respected beside the sovereign, while all preparations for the next reign belonged exclusively to William and Catherine. The statement confirmed the substance without repeating the humiliating words. Camilla approved it herself. The Queen refused to issue a denial because doing so would reopen the battle and weaken the understanding she had reached privately with Catherine. Her decision ended the briefing war before it could begin. Charles then summoned the four of them one final time. Authority had been settled. Pride had been wounded. Secrecy had failed. The nation had delivered its divided reaction, but the monarchy's true verdict would be written in a smaller room, through four people choosing whether the painful truth would destroy their family or finally free it. The final meeting contained none of the fury that had shaken the palace days earlier. There were no senior officials, no prepared folders, and no staff waiting close enough to hear. Charles arrived with Camilla. William entered beside Catherine. They sat not as competing households, but as a family forced to accept a painful truth. Affection could remain, but authority had to pass cleanly from one reign to the next. Charles knew the constitutional argument was already finished. The signed framework remained in force, and the palace clarification had settled public uncertainty. A transition framework is a written agreement defining how duties and authority move from the current reign to the next. No further official decision was required. What remained was harder. The king, the queen, the prince and the princess now had to decide whether the boundary would become a lasting wound or the beginning of honesty. William spoke first. He told Camilla that he had never intended to deny her marriage, title, or years of service beside his father. The future king had acted to protect Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis from competing instructions and private promises that could weaken the next household. He wanted one clear center of authority when the crown passed, not another generation trapped inside unfinished arguments. Camilla listened without interrupting. The Queen admitted that she had confused influence with belonging. Losing control had felt like being told that the family had never truly accepted her. Catherine's private visit changed that understanding. Camilla finally saw that recognition did not require permanent authority, and that affection could survive even when official power ended. Charles turned toward his wife and apologized. The king had promised her a future role he never possessed the power to guarantee. He then faced William, and admitted that postponing clear boundaries had forced his son to establish them through confrontation. His silence had protected no one. It had merely delayed the pain until it became public. Charles took the original framework from a side table and signed a short personal note recognizing William's full authority over the future household. He passed the pen to Camilla. She added her signature, confirming that her office would respect the separation without resistance. Catherine placed no signature on the page. The princess told Camilla she would still stand beside her at family occasions and support the causes she had built. Institutional power would be separated, but personal exile would not follow. William and Charles left together. The framework remained permanent. Camilla retained dignity beside her husband, while Catherine's future position stood beyond dispute. And with that final acknowledgement, the palace doors closed not upon another mystery, but upon a conflict that had at last been faced, settled, and emotionally understood. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.